The battle was not so much for the town as for the hills and the pass to the mountains beyond. Jijiga marks the gateway to the highlands, controlling the only road to Hara and the Ethiopian capital of Addis Ababa beyond. It was the headquarters for the Ethiopian Army's 3rd Division. Thousands of men in 5 army camps around the town. They included an entire tank corps, many of whose tanks lie abandoned between the town and the mountains beyond. Tanks almost intact, as many of the Ethiopians fled to the safety of the hills. There were the bodies of some who never made it. The Somalis say thousands died or were captured, but there were few graves and we were shown no prisoners. It is a war in which the only certainty is the outcome of each battle. As military commanders took us over some of the equipment left behind, we could still hear radio reports out of Addis Ababa claiming that the Ethiopians were still here. Another forsaken Ethiopian tank seemed to reproduce the pattern from further south in the Ogaden. Despite the strength of their weaponry, the Ethiopians hadn't stayed to fight. In the vital Karamada Pass above Jijiga, no sign of battle remnants, and the Somalis have now pushed on some 40 miles across the plateau beyond. By dawn light, for fear of air attacks, 15 miles above Jijiga was as far as they would take us, but looking back at the pass, its military significance was clear. Back in the town itself, some of those who'd fled to the bush during the fighting were out celebrating. As in other battle centres we'd visited in the Ogaden, they were out with branches, sticks and guns, chanting abuse against the departed Ethiopians. It was the British who'd finally handed the town to the Ethiopians in 1948, and though in a British survey 15 years ago these people had voted not to remain under Ethiopia, the international community couldn't agree what to do about it. And so it's waited until now, with the Somalis taking advantage of an Ethiopia weakened by inner turmoil and by her change of defense dependence from America to the Soviet Union. At the main Ethiopian tank base, our first view of Russian-supplied armaments. 2 tired Soviet tanks. The Somali Liberation Front claimed these were part of the first batch of elderly Russian tanks supplied via Aden back in April. The Ethiopians have meanwhile claimed that any Russian tanks belong not to themselves or the Liberation Forces, but to the Somali Regular Army. But with no markings, it was an impossible claim to substantiate. All across the base there were ammunition dumps like this one, piled high with mainly American-supplied rockets, shells and mortars, and once more for the first time we saw alongside Soviet ammunition, an additional sign that perhaps by now Soviet equipment is at last getting through to the Ethiopian front line. Carefully laid out nearby, the remnants of what the Liberation Force claimed was a downed Ethiopian F-5 fighter bomber. Tail fins, nose cone and rockets from planes which the Israelis are said to be helping to keep airborne. The fighting now is at Hara, some 60 miles beyond these hills. The Somalis are within sight of their objective. The Soviets are airlifting massive quantities of arms into the Ethiopian force there. But from what's happened here, the Soviet aid seems to have done little to mend the shattered state of Ethiopian morale. And military observers are saying that it'll take direct involvement by Soviet or Cuban personnel to stem the flow of the Somali advance and the collapse of the Ethiopian empire.